Okay, welcome everybody. My name is Monica Flores, and I'm a technical project manager at Lullabot. Today I'll be going over 12 tips for planning your Drupal project. And this was originally presented as an article on the Lullabot blog. So take about 15 minutes and we'll go over some of the top 12 tips we found. A little bit about me. I'm a technical project manager, Scrum certified in 2020. I've been a web developer since 2004, and I'm currently at Lullabot. I love reading and hiking and baking. And fun fact, I adopted 2 cats in 2019. About Lullabot, we've built some of the first household name Drupal sites, and we were pivotal in the Drupal platform's widespread adoption. We do strategy, design, and development for well-known digital experiences that use Drupal. And then a little bit about you. At any given moment, we always like to know what are your pronouns, a little bit about your land acknowledgement or where you're based and the current role that you play. I'm currently based outside of the DC area on Manahoic lands, and my pronouns are she and her and hers. So here's a quick list of the 12 tips that we've gone over. First is to bring together the core team. Second is establish your roadmap, your guidelines for working together. Third is determining your goals, understanding them and aligning around them. Fourth, define your MVP. Fifth, you can go into the content types, the user roles, and the permissions you expect to have in your MVP. Sixth, determine your categories, like your taxonomies, and your classifications. For example, if you have lists or exposed filters that you'll be using throughout the site, determine them as much as you can in advance. 7, you'll want to know what your success metrics are. What determines success for your project? 8, circulate your RFP. 9, vet and review the submissions you receive from your vendors. 10, set up your kickoff. And 11, plan for any migrations needed. For example, if you need to migrate from WordPress or from Joomla or some other content management system like AEM into Drupal. And then 12, scheduling the build out, as well as any bonus items of figuring out your support and maintenance plan. So bringing together the core team, typically you're going to be using a process that works with both the technical folks on your side, as well as any editors that may have the responsibility for promoting content to the site. So a typical team usually has a content strategist, a number of the different editors, as well as the initial designers, as well as somebody who can support with the technical aspect, either a technical architect or a developer. So what you'll go through is a process of identifying who those people are and what role they'll play. Recommend you set a date and have a wiki or a folder to put all of that information in place, and then make that a recurring event, maybe every 2 weeks to begin, and then moving to weekly, so that the team has that time blocked on their calendar. To establish guidelines for working together, typically different people will have different areas of responsibility for the website, so it's up to you to determine as a group how the different teams will both give approval or be consulted in the development of the plan. So just determine what those guidelines are. It can be quite difficult if you have uncertain lines of communication or uncertain areas of responsibility. But as John Rearick here has mentioned, can work in project management software, something like Jira or Asana, and then also take decisions documents to identify who needs to be consulted, who needs to give the approval, and who just needs to be informed. Third, understanding and aligning around your goals. If you don't know where you're headed for, you'll never reach it, right? So what you'll want to determine is, what is the goal of the website that you're building at this time? It might be as simple as having a better layout for your content, having a nicer design, maybe making it more mobile or accessible. So the point is for you to determine those guidelines in advance. We've worked with a couple different groups to come up with lists of prioritized guidelines, and that is what determines the flow of the work. Here's an example of what constituted a successful redesign for one of our clients. Modern and clean, 21st century design, mobile friendliness is at the top of this list, a very clear and straightforward navigation, and then other points, as you can see in here, as well as in the blog post. What is the number 4? What is your MVP? What is your minimum viable product? Let's not let the perfect be the enemy of the good. What we want is to be able to launch on time with a working version and then do the follow-on work to, for example, fine tune or add new features or add new editorial capabilities. Determine in advance what you can deliver in a reasonable amount of time, and then use that when you're determining the rest of the scope of the work. An example of what it may look like in terms of feature requests for your MVP. In this case, we may have editors who are asking, it's very important for me to create a blog post and to edit those blog posts. If so, put that into the priority 1 bucket of items to create. However, you may have other staff who would like to also submit articles or who might want to view unpublished articles, but that might be a priority 2 item, as might be the ability for somebody to flag an article, such as an editor or an editor-in-chief. So here's another example. A priority 3 item is unpublishing something after a fixed amount of time. For example, maybe it's a campaign and then it needs to go away at the end of the fundraising cycle. So just determine what are the priorities for your MVP, then you can build around that and have checkpoints along the way as the delivery schedule continues. 5, identifying content types, user roles, and permissions. This gets into the meat of the project and allows you to determine who are the types of users who will be logging in to your content management system and what are the tasks that they'll be doing, down to the node level, which is down to the individual piece of content level. As an example, blog writers are typically submitting blog posts that include images, potentially YouTube videos or Wistia videos, or links to other pieces of content in the site. Photographers may just be submitting images. Editors may be creating articles, white papers, resources, and other documents, and they might be targeted to a particular audience. So here's a chance for you to just lay out, if you can, a giant grid with a list of the types of people who will be logging into the site. In this case, you can see on the far left, we have anonymous or guest users, people who are just visiting, all the way to the over to the right-hand side, which is the super administrator, somebody who can do everything on the site and has full control, full power over the content as well as the users. Typically, your users will be somewhere in between, and you can go right down the grid of creating, editing their own content, editing anybody's content, and deleting. Once you get a sense of this, you can then lay it out and bring that to your web developer. 6, determine categories and classifications. For this, I think of this in terms of what can you put into buckets. So categories in the Drupal side are consist of terms or taxonomy terms that you can use to sort and classify your information. So as an example, we may have, these are 3 different columns of 3 different types of categorizations. So for events, you may have different types of events, right? You might have private versus public. You may have that it requires payment or requires pre-registration, is online only, or is open to alumni, or maybe is part of series. So any or all of those items in the left column could be a classification of a particular event. Similarly, we have different types of people and different types of buildings. This is just a sample organization. You might have different types of classifications or categorizations for your own content. Determine those in advance and figure out which of those need to be filtered or sorted and use those as you build your classifications list. 7, defining your success metrics. You gotta be sure of what you're headed to and that you make it a success by going backward. What does success look like for our project? If you can determine it, then you can act towards that goal. So in this case, here's an example. We wanted to have different design, and we had an ability for the end client to determine which of the designs they wanted. And for the design of this content, higher, better headers, hero images, an ability to sort by the author, and very clear text identified. Just determine what your end goal is and move toward it. 8, circulate your RFP. We just recommend you find a list of local vendors or folks who are well knowledgeable and well versed in your particular industry. Circulate the RFP and get a response in a manageable time frame, 2 to 4 weeks. Here's a couple of questions that you might add in the RFP. Ideally, you work with somebody who has had experience doing the type of work that you've already done. So ask your peer and industry leaders for recommendations. 9, vetting and reviewing vendor submissions. We approach this like we do with hiring. Go ahead and develop a matrix, have the same people evaluate all the vendors, assign a scoring mechanism, and schedule interviews with the folks who are going to continue. In our case, we have multiple types of teams that we recommend for particular projects based on the stage that they're in. If it's strategy, might require content strategists. Design works very closely with the UX and the UI. And then oftentimes we also work on the development to bring the whole thing together. Okay, 10, kickoff. It's time for you. You've decided upon your vendor. Let's ensure a successful start to the project. Set a time and date. Include everyone in the planning process for that and give them all the documents in advance, including those user roles and permissions, the content types, the classifications, the metrics of success, and the expectations of participation. Ideally, you want people participating in the kickoff who are there with you for that whole process. So block off time on people's calendar that makes sense and works on a regular cadence so you can move this project forward. Here's what a typical kickoff looks like. If we're working on site, we'll bring some whiteboarding, some quick modeling of information, card sorting, just ways for you to handle things like prioritization, different types of features and their importance, and then things like navigation. As a follow-on, as a plan for migrations, oftentimes for your content, you'll need to take content from external sources and bring it in. For example, if you're moving WordPress from a blog from WordPress to Drupal. So just build in time to your process for that migration process, and or if it's content needs to come over. For example, in this case, we have navigation that needs to come over. We need to make it mobile specific, and we need to readjust and rearrange the ordered priority of how the navigation elements appear on the stage. You may want to ask your teams to organize and sort by department. Maybe you have to do it by user type, and then also tags as categorization classifications, or maybe it's by tracks, right? Graduate student, undergraduate student, or other user needs. Here's some other examples that you can reference on our blog of how to organize the content, who to bring on board, how to work through the process of the kickoff and moving into a regular schedule of analyzing the documents, figuring out the next steps, determining what work needs to be created in the next session or phase, and then evaluating how the work is going. Finally, the overall schedule, you can come up with your team and with your desired vendor to just schedule that build out. It is a construction process. You have some opportunities at your fingertips to be able to re-envision and reimagine how you're going to lay out your website. And there's a great way for you to have checkpoints. So potentially you may want to circulate different elements of the site to your different stakeholders at fixed points in a kind of demo day. So for example, if the blog or if the events calendar team or if the departments, different departments want to see their landing pages, set that into the schedule. So then I encourage you to use a feedback cycle. You create items, you have a schedule, you work with your vendor to determine how to implement that schedule, then you review the vendor's results. You can continually have a cycle where you can give early and frequent feedback on how the process is going so that nothing gets off track and you are aligned on your goals and your deliverables. If you have any questions, please reach out to us at Lullabot. We look forward to supporting you in this work, and Drupal is something that we love, that we enjoy and appreciate and are really good at. So we'll look forward to connecting with you. And as always, you can look at these articles and others on lullabot.com. Thanks so much.